And for those, just to remind the regulars that on Mother's Day and Father's Day, we like to take these days just to honor our men and our women respectively. So today, of Mother's Day, we don't want to make it only about mothers where people feel maybe excluded or, I don't want to come to church, it's all about mothers and I'm not a mother, or, if you're a guy, what does that have to say to me? But rather, we want to take the time to really honor our women, our mothers in particular, but to honor our ladies, which hopefully, ladies, you will find yourself blessed through this service. Just through the worship, in Leslie praying, whatever, mothers in our church, and just the Word of God to encourage you this morning. And we find it's probably going to work going forward to do it on the back end of the Treasures Conference. And so for those ladies that were here this weekend for the Treasures Conference, Friday night, Saturday, just all that you received and your value as a woman, we want to kind of carry on through into Mother's Day. And we'll do the same at Father's Day. I want to honor our men, and I think it's good. It's good for us today to honor our ladies, and I think it's good for us as men to understand and to appreciate the value that God has placed on women and the role that women play. And so hopefully every single person will go away with something today just from the Word of God. So we live in the 21st century. Obviously, we know this. We live in the 21st century, and so much has changed in regards to equality between men and women. 100 years ago, just over 100 years ago, in many countries, even in the Western world, in Europe and the States, women did not have the vote. You know this from history, don't you? A little over 100 years ago. You go and read in history of some of the movements at the time and so on, women campaigning for equal rights and so on. And so through the progression of the 20th century into the 21st century, so much has changed. So much has changed in terms of opening up the marketplace for women to enter in, for women to become all that they want to and aspire to be. And yet, 2 decades in, we're in the third decade of the 21st century, still the world can be quite a scary place and a confusing place for women still. And we don't always feel that in the church because hopefully we would understand that the church is different, but we don't live in a vacuum. We live in a real world. All this kind of stuff is going on, and that's why we feel it's so important for us on Mother's Day and Father's Day to take the opportunity to reaffirm the value that God places on women and that God places on men. The roles that God has given to women and the roles that God has given to men. So we can be secure in what God has called us to and not be drawn into all the stuff that's going on in the world around us. That makes sense? So what a lot of men don't realize, but women instinctively do, is just how unsafe the world still is for women. This is in the third decade of the 21st century. How the world is still just this unsafe place. Women instinctively know that. I was listening to a woman's, just a story really, it wasn't a testimony, it was just her account really of, she's a middle-aged woman, she was on business in another city, and she was there for longer than a week, and so in the middle of the week, she thought, I need to go and do my laundry. And so the B&B that she was staying at didn't have that service, and so she found a laundromat not far, and so she thought she'd take a walk. Mid-afternoon, middle of the week, she's got a gap in the conference or whatever she was there for, and she goes down to the laundromat, puts her washing in, and obviously now she's waiting, and she says the guy comes in. Guy with headphones on, kind of looks a little preoccupied until he notices her. And then, so she's given the account. She says, so he looked at me. When I say looked at me, he really looked at me. Up and down and just stared. And so she was a little uncomfortable. She was a laundromat in the middle of the afternoon. People are walking by. So she carried on. And he just continued to stare at her. So busy and just stared. Like unashamedly just staring. And then another guy comes in. So she decides at this point, I'm just feeling a little uncomfortable with this. Let me go and stand outside. I'll wait for my laundry to finish outside. Just feels a little safer, a little more comfortable. She goes outside and she phones a friend and she's looking. And now the first guy is now looking. He's up at the window, now looking at her through the window. Like just look at her. And then the other guys are talking, and And she can pick up that they're, talking like about her. She feels they're just talking about her. So eventually she gets, I just feel unsafe. She phones an Uber, and she gets her laundry. It isn't even finished yet. It's still wet. She puts it in the bag she's brought, and she gets into her Uber. So she doesn't say a thing. She's a little uncomfortable. She gets in the Uber. It's another middle-aged woman driving the Uber. And they start talking. She says she's from out of town. She doesn't give anything away about what's just gone on. Nothing happened, essentially. And so when she hears that she's from out of town, the Uber driver, this lady, just starts, this is my job, I've just got to do, but, our city has just gone so down. I feel unsafe when I'm driving. In fact, she said, I don't drive at night. I just feel so unsafe. And the woman, she said, have you heard? This is just a side item. I thought this was interesting. She said, have you heard, people get kidnapped off the street. Somebody drives by, they just pull somebody into the car, they drive them to the nearest ATM, and they force them then to, clear out their daily limits on their bank accounts, and then they leave them, and off they go. So that's in our city. And I thought, okay, I knew this, but I thought, I wonder what kind of reprobate city that is. Then I'd be thinking, it's probably Durban, hey? No disrespect if you come from Durban. So Durban, that's happened in Durban. Just by a side item, this happened in Milwaukee, America. Not South Africa, Milwaukee, America. Crime is everywhere, and women feel unsafe everywhere. Everywhere. They don't know when they're going to bump into, as they move up the corporate ladder, bump into a chauvinistic boss. He doesn't really believe that a woman should be doing that job. Or worse, a little bit of a sexual predator boss who kind of starts to make the move and so on. And I don't think a lot of us guys realize just how unsafe women can feel in the world in which we live. Sometimes even, sadly, in the church. In the church. And so it's important for us to understand our worth and value. It's important for us as men to understand the worth and value of women. And then it can also be a very confusing place for women. A very confusing place for women. I mean, you've seen in more recent years in particular, just the rise in sort of the whole trans movement. And people, now all of a sudden, biological men wanting to transition now competing in sports against women. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. The most probably well-known, Leah Thomas, competing in swimming meets. He was ranked something like 500 and something in his swimming discipline in the world. I didn't know the rankings went down so low. But anyway, like 500th and something in the world. Of course, competing against women, he won everything. Everybody goes like, that's not fair, this is not right. But all of a sudden we realize the world has become very blurry. Blurry. What is a woman? What is a woman really and a man? And what are the differences? We can unfortunately trace and thank feminism for that. Partly, I think feminism set out for noble goals of equality and recognizing the value and so on of women. Unwittingly, I think along the way, wittingly or unwittingly, kind of blurred the lines between what God created in man and woman and the difference in roles thereof. And so when everything becomes blurry, well, then we kind of got to find our own way. And now men want to become women, and women want to become men. And what really then is the unique character and makeup of a woman as God designed her to be. The abortion issue is an affront to the very thing that God created woman for, the ability to create and nurture life. And it says, and this is the world in which we live in, her body, her rules. Her body, her rules. Her body, her rules. We're shouted from the mountaintop. What about God's creative order here? What about what God created? And the very thing that God gave woman as an immense privilege to carry life within her body, to give birth to life. The world says is an unnecessary thing. It's quite an oppressive thing, actually, that you want to be freed of, and you can be freed of if you want to be. And all of a sudden it blurs the value of what women have, really. Does that make sense? We need to understand what the world is saying so we can understand and double down on what we believe and what the Bible clearly teaches, because that and therein is our freedom. not the world, and not what the world believes and what the world would hold to. So we're going to have a look at a story. We're going to have a look at a story. It's probably not a well-known story, and it's not a well-known female character, but she's an exemplary woman. And I want us to have a look at that today for all of us as women to see the value and the worth that God placed, particularly in this woman in the story. And it's quite an amazing story, and I'm going to tell you the story because it's a long story. It's found in 1 Samuel 25. Any of the ladies know who the female character is in the story? No, not Rahab. No. Abigail. Abigail. You heard of a little Abigail? Abigail. Quite a woman, Abigail. So I would encourage you, for the sake of time, today we're not going to read the whole story. I'll tell you the story, but go and read the story. We're going to highlight a few verses in terms of Abigail's response. But let me tell you the story quickly. So in 1 Samuel 25, David is on the run from King Saul. He's got a band of merry men like Robin Hood, and they are essentially outlaws, and they are avoiding King Saul and his army that are still hunting David down. So he's in a particular area near Carmel, Mount Carmel. He's in a particular area at this time, and his men engage with some herdsmen from a man called Nabal. Nabal is Abigail's husband, and it says he is a mean-spirited guy. He's wealthy. He's got a lot of goats, a lot of sheep, the Bible says. He's very wealthy, and he's one of those mean-spirited guys. You know, probably one of those self-made men. I got it all. I made it all. Got my trophy wife. And anyway, and so David's men are tired. They're obviously on the run, so they're in need. And they've treated the herdsmen from Nabal's herdsmen very well. And so they get near to his dwelling, whatever. And so it's harvest or festival time. And so David just needs some supplies for his guys. And so he sends some of his representatives to Nabal to just go and ask if, in good Middle Eastern hospitality, that they would kind of just provide some provisions for. That's all he's asking. That's all he's asking. When word gets to Nabal like hits the roof. He goes, like, who are these guys? I don't owe them anything. I've made my money. I'm not giving it away to anybody else. And so on. Basically, he says to David via his servants, get lost. Just get lost. Want nothing to do with you. So David hears about this, and now David is wuss. He thinks, nobody treats me like this. And so David plans to go and kill them all. That's how they did it in those days. Just he thinks, I'm just going to go and, don't be rude to me and my men. It's a bit of an honor thing. I'm going to sort you out. And so David gets ready. David now gets ready to essentially go and take on Nabal and sort him out. Abigail, his wife, hears about this. And it says she sprung into action. She got these supplies because now Nabal's servants come and tell her what's going on, and she decides to act. And so she gathers the provisions, and she goes to where they said David's come from, and on the way they meet. And Abigail falls down, bows down before David, and just explains everything. And she says, I know my husband's a fool, and you are deserving. And she says something, we'll read this portion later, of just her honoring and seeing the purposes of God in and on David's life. She said, you don't have to do this. And you know what she does, essentially? She saves, and she says this, she essentially saves David from unnecessary bloodshed. Do you remember, he couldn't build the temple because there was enough blood on his hands. There would be more blood on his hands. And she essentially intervenes to kind of save the situation by de-escalating everything. And then she goes back to her husband. David backs off. She goes back to her husband. She waits for him to sober up because it said he was drunk. So she waits for him to sober up, and she tells him everything that she has done. Behind his back, of course. And it says that he became like stone. And he died 10 days later. Don't have to read too much into it. Probably had a stroke. He was probably so furious with her that he, had a little aneurysm. And that was the end of Nabal, the mean, wicked man. And David, being the charmer that he was, he said, well, Abigail, You're a widow. You don't need to be a widow no more. Why don't you come and be my wife? And Abigail became David's wife. Number 6, I think. Don't worry about that. It's not important. They had lots of wives in those days. All right, so we see in Abigail this incredible woman. This incredible woman. I want to just highlight a few things of what she did. Now, this was Abigail. But in 1 Corinthians, we are told, Paul writes to the Corinthians, he says, we read and we study the Old Testament because all the examples of the Old Testament are there to teach us. They are there as examples for us to learn and to follow. In other words, Abigail was Abigail, but she represents the presence and the power and the purposes of God in a woman. Does it make sense? So we're taking from what she did because she represented the best of what God has called woman to be, the value that God has put in woman. All right, and so, ladies, trust that you'll be blessed as we just look at a few of these scriptures. And the first we're going to look at is in verse 3. And this is what it was said of Abigail right at the beginning. So it speaks of Nabal. It says his name, verse 3, his name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and a beautiful woman, but her husband, a Calebite, was surly and mean in his dealings. It's very interesting there that she is called both beautiful and intelligent. Beautiful and intelligent. Now, instinctively in our society, we all know about beauty and you know, most little girls want to grow up. And what do they ask their dads? Dad, do I look pretty? Do I look pretty? Do I look pretty? And part of that is you know, the society in which we live that so, prizes beauty and so on, which also puts pressure on women. I mean, how do you measure up to the swimsuit cover model on the magazine? I've got good news, ladies. Good news. In 2 Peter chapter 3, 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 4 and 5, this is what it says about beauty. It says, so firstly, Peter writes, he says, don't go running after the world to try and, be beautiful like the world would say. And again, there's nothing wrong with putting on makeup, looking after your hair or anything like that. But then it goes on to say this, verse 4, instead, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. For this is the way the holy women of the past put their hope in God, used to make themselves beautiful. They used to make themselves beautiful. In other words, true beauty comes from within. Have you ever noticed that you can see on the cover of a magazine, or maybe you've met somebody in person, that there's strikingly beautiful looks? And this is not true of all women necessarily, but sometimes you'll meet from time to time a strikingly beautiful woman, and her eyes just seem hollow. And I mean shallow. There's just maybe an emptiness behind those eyes. And then you've seen women that may not make the cover of Swimsuit magazine in terms of their beauty, but their smile is just radiant, and their eyes are alive. See, what is the Bible telling us? That true beauty actually comes from within. True beauty comes from within. Nothing wrong with doing your hair, ladies. We like that. Do your hair. But it's not about that. It's about the inside, what's on the inside. So Abigail was a beautiful spirit, had a beautiful spirit. She was beautiful. She had a beautiful spirit. And you'll see that as the story unfolds. And it says that she was intelligent. Now, for hundreds and hundreds of years, women have not been seen necessarily as intelligent. Of course, now you can go to university and all the rest. And I suppose, in some ways, we recognize that men are more cognitive, more reasoning. Women are intuitive, and the downside of that is considered emotional. And so to a guy, emotions are like, no, that's just too risky. I can't go on emotions. I've got to go on logic. Because logic's like kind of superior. Not really, actually. Not really. Do you know that they've found that women are as intelligent as men? They just see it differently. They just see things differently. They did an interesting study between boards, executives, and committees that were male only and those that were mixed, that had men and women. Guess which one functioned far better? Obviously. Yes, obviously. Where men and women, you know why? Because women see things guys don't. And it's true, guys see things women don't. But that's for Father's Day. So, let's not get ahead of ourselves. So women see things. Women see things. And then there is, we've come to understand that intelligence is far broader than just being able to crunch numbers in your head, and work on a project that will send a man to the moon. I'm not assuming all guys did that, but there might have been females on the team. But anyway, it's not just about intelligence, IQ. It's also about emotional intelligence. Guess who scores generally much higher on emotional intelligence? Women. They just do. They just do. Women just get it. They just get it. Just get it. I went to minister to so-and-so today because I know they're going through a hard time. We just spend a whole lot of time just ministering and talking and so on. Guys, huh? What? I didn't even notice. Women get it. They get empathy. They get connection. They just do. And so that's why women are invaluable, actually. Do you know why? Emotional intelligence is going to get you through life probably better than intelligence. You can be very bright. You can be a rocket scientist on your 5th marriage because you just didn't know how to handle your woman. What's the help of putting a man on the moon and you go home lonely? To no one. Because you can't engage properly. I would suggest that emotional intelligence is as important as any other kind of intelligence. Because it's going to help you get through life and engage with people. So, if you are married today, learn from your emotionally tuned wife. She will help you. She will help. I know mine has a lot. So, she was intelligent. She was beautiful and she was intelligent. The next thing is that we see is Abigail was protective. This was so interesting in verse 18. So, the servants come to Abigail and they tell her what's happened. And now Nabal has just dissed David's men, and David is probably going to be quite ticked off. And so they essentially ask her to do something. This is what she does. It says, I just love this. Verse 18. Abigail lost no time. It's like she sprung into action. She sprung into action, and all the women are going, I would have done the same. Eh? Why? Because there's a protective instinct that kicks in that women have. I know guys have it too. Guys have want to protect our family and protect our home and so on. The stronger instinct in men actually is provider. That's why for a man not to be able to work to provide for his family is a really hard thing that women probably just don't. But I've got a nice salary. I've got it all covered. It's a thing for men. Because we deep within us is this desire to be able to provide for our families. Women protect. That is their instinct. And they're wired that way, to look after. We even prayed it. We even prayed it in the prayer meeting earlier. That mothers, women in general, mothers in particular, have this protective instinct. The bear and her cubs, yes? The mother bear and her cubs. Where's the father bear? Oh, no, he's gone off to another woman. But the mother bear stays. Sorry, that's also for Father's Day. We'll tackle all these issues, I promise you. You just imagine some mother bears, at the mom's tea party with all the little cubs. Where did Billy go? No, I don't know where Billy is. Back in the forest, probably, shacking up with some other woman. Just discussing what all these men do. Leave us with the children. But instinctive for a mother is this desire to protect. Don't come between a mother bear and her cubs. Don't become between a mother and her children. This desire to protect this. Why? Because women are wired relationally. They get it when relationships are out of sync. Abigail realized David's coming. David, and later on we'll see in a moment, David was anointed. She knew that. She knew he was a military guy, and so, her husband, it didn't matter how wealthy he was, David was coming. She knew what was going to go down. And so her protective instinct kicks in. She wants to try and diffuse the situation. Women are good at that, far better than men generally, at diffusing a situation. Diffusing a situation. Unless they nag, that escalates it. Sorry, just kidding. But women are really good generally at diffusing a situation. Why? Because they're wired connectively. They're wired connectively. And so Abigail's protective instincts, desire to protect, the desire to keep that which she had and everything, desire to prevent bloodshed, kicks in. Women have that. It's a beautiful, God-given quality. I think it's part of the nurturing. Part of nurturing. That a woman will do anything. A mother will do anything to protect her cubs, to look after them. A mother will go without to make sure that her kids have. That's the instinct we're talking about, right there. They will sacrifice. They will give. But the downside of that is this. That because women are so sensitive, I don't mean sensitive as, oh, I take offense at that. I don't mean that kind of sensitivity. I mean, women are just sensitive to these dynamics. It means that women can be hurt far deeper, generally speaking, than guys. Many comments that dads will make to their son and their daughter might be the same comments. Guys tend to just shrug it off, don't kick ball, don't punch something. With a daughter, a girl, it'll stay there a long time because they're sensitive. They're sensitive. Part of that protective instinct. And that's why women can often feel hurt. And sometimes guys, and this we need to hear this, gentlemen, sometimes guys don't even realize through the things that we say and the comments sometimes, that we just make, how deeply it can hurt the very ones we love. What I so appreciate about our Treasures Conference, speaking on behalf of the ladies, is that there are a number of other ladies' conferences that happen in our city, by the way. Normally about September time. Third term seems to be like ladies' conference season. So probably, on consecutive weekends, you could just go to a whole number of ladies' conferences in the city. They'll invite everybody, or the women in the city who want to come, might get overseas speakers, and good. And some of you have been, and that's great. I like what we do. And the angle is quite different. The angle is to tackle ladies' issues and just the value of a woman in the presence of the Lord. And so everything that's for those of you on Treasures will know, and if you weren't to Treasures, a punt for next year, don't miss it. Everything that is done is done to women being vulnerable in their stories of how God has restored and healed. Why? Because for a lot of women, there are hurts and vulnerabilities that we carry. And how God heals and restores and makes whole the value and the worth, the interactive stuff, allowing God just to come and minister into those areas of our lives. So powerful. So powerful. We need that. And we need that. Number 3. The third thing that strikes me in this passage is Abigail's conduct to both David and to her husband. And that was of honor. So God has created women beautiful and intelligent. He has created them with his protective instinct. And he's also created them to honor. Created them to honor. And so Abigail goes to David first and she bows down. She sees him. They meet in like a valley. He's coming down the one side. She goes down the other side. And when they meet, she gets off her horse or whatever she was traveling on, and she bows down before David. She bows down before him. In verse 23, it says, when Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey, not horse, and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. Later on, she goes back to Nabal, her husband, and in verse 37, it says, so he had a banquet the night before, he was in high spirits. So she doesn't tell him while he's drunk and won't remember anything. She waits till he's sober. And then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him because he became like a stone. About 10 years later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. And And here's the thing that strikes me about Abigail's conduct. Both to David and to her husband, she was honoring. She was honoring. I think it's quite important because the Bible does talk a lot about submission. Yeah, we'll go there. We'll go there. It does. But in our modern world, it sounds so archaic. Who submits to who, anybody anymore? No. It sounds so archaic. We want to dismiss it. And you know what? Because we live in the world, that can permeate the church. That can permeate the church. I've met guys and girls say to me, I don't submit to nobody. You know what they often follow? I don't submit to anybody except the Lord. Well, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible calls us to submit to the authorities over us. Children to parents. Oh, we like that one. Wives to husbands. Now, the word is literally means to arrange under. And it's to arrange under for covering and protection. That's the heart of God. Because in the whole passage of husbands and wives in Ephesians chapter 5, it says, wives, submit to your husbands. Yes. And then the very next verse, husbands, love your wives. Ah, cool, I can do that. Wait, hang on. It's not the whole verse. Love your wives as Christ loved the church. Yeah, I think I do. Wait. And gave himself up for her. Never met a woman that has a problem honoring a husband who's willing to lay down his life for his wife. Now, I know we're not perfect. Guys aren't perfect. Women aren't perfect. So, because we live in this fallen world, we resist a little bit, we push back, and that kind of thing. But it's to arrange under. It's to arrange under. The important thing, and this is what's so interesting about Abigail, is that she did what was right. In going to David, her husband had just fobbed David off. So she's going against her husband's wish because she knows, though, what is the right thing to do. What is the right thing to do? What is the right thing to do? And so sometimes that means I'm going to honor God first. Not as a reason for rebellion and that kind of thing, but to honor God first. And so in doing so, Abigail was able to step into a situation while she honored David. She was still honoring her husband, even though she disagreed. Does that make sense? I think it can be a bit blurry for us, but you can disagree. We disagree with the government, don't we? I mean, there are a whole lot of things that they're doing. They go, look, no, man. But you can still honor. It's an honor. I understand that I'm arranged under. I understand that they've been put over me by God himself. And therefore, I'm going to pray for our president. And I'm going to pray for the leaders, as Leslie led us this morning. And I'm going to pray for those in authority and power. I can disagree. Of course I can. But in my posture, in my heart, I'm going to honor them as those set above me in the Lord. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? For many, many years growing up, my dad wasn't saved. He's now saved, but he wasn't saved. My mom said to him early on when in their marriage, when he decided not to go to church anymore, my mom said, well, I'm going. Go take the kids with me. We're going to church. You can stay at home. I'm going to church. Because my mom wasn't trying to be rebellious. She was just honoring God first. So do you understand that submission is not meant to be this oppressive thing? It's actually meant to be a liberating thing where men can actually free women under their covering and under their protection to become the woman that they're called to be, even within this imperfect world. And so on. It does mean, though, doesn't mean that you're a doormat, woman, ladies. It doesn't mean that it's always just yes, yes, yes. You can disagree and still honor. Here's what's interesting. This is how we do this. This is how it helps. I want to read to you just Abigail's response to David. Now, David's not her husband now at this point, but let's read from verse 26. This is what Abigail says to David. Now, she doesn't know David at all, but she's heard. She's heard. Everybody's heard about what's going on between Saul and David. This is it. Now, since the Lord has kept you, my master, so now she's speaking of David, from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, May your enemies and all who intend to harm my master be like Nabal. Let this gift which your servant has brought to my master be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's offense, for the Lord will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my master, because he fights the Lord's battles. Let no wrongdoing be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you, that's King Saul, to take your life, the life of my master will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away, as he has done for my master. Every good thing he has promised concerning him, and he has appointed him leader over Israel. And so it goes on. So what helped Abigail to honor both David and Nabal, her husband, in those moments? Is she understood the Lord's purposes. She was committed, first and foremost, to doing God's will and to honoring what she now understood David to be, the anointed one of God. She knew all that because she said it with her own mouth. So she understood that. So she understood she doesn't need David to be getting into more bloodshed. And so she kicks in to diffuse the situation by doing what is right. And then later on, she goes to her husband to tell him what she had done. She doesn't live in deception. Of course, yes, she did go behind his back, essentially. But then she comes into the light, only to save the situation. She comes into the light, waits till he sobers up, to honor him in telling him, full disclosure, what she had done. Does it help you, ladies, in the whole honoring thing? In the whole honoring thing. And then lastly, it's not mentioned here, but you see it in Abigail's conduct. That something I think we can often overlook is the deep, deep courage that resides in women. You know, we often think of courage as men who go to war that are prepared to give their lives for freedom and what they're fighting for, or the fireman that runs into a burning building with no thought of his own safety. And so, yes, those things are courageous. Those things are absolutely courageous. But yeah, Abigail is living in a probably a loveless marriage. Nabal was a mean-spirited guy. And you know, you generally don't find that a guy's mean-spirited to everybody else, but he's like such a charming, wonderful husband. You know, a mean-spirited person is a mean-spirited person. And they treat everybody with contempt. And so chances are she was trapped in a loveless marriage. Because she was both beautiful and intelligent, she was probably in those days, in those customs, a kind of like what it would have been like a trophy kind of wife that Nabal had taken, provided everything for her, but didn't really love her or encourage her or anything like that. And yet, she still has the courage to do what is right, even at risk to herself. She doesn't know how it's going to turn out. She knows David's a man of war. I mean, he's a warrior. She doesn't know how to, the stakes are quite high, but because of that desire to diffuse the situation, do what is right, she was willing to risk everything to go. You know, God has put a tenacity in women, a resilience in women that is incredible. He really has. He really has. And, you know, we often look at heroes, you know, great warriors that come back from the battlefield and so on. And now women can do that too. They're in the military. But here's a courage we often overlook. The woman that has been badly treated, like Abigail was, at the hands of a man, a father or a husband, and she picks up her life. You know, the people that probably inspire me the most on this planet is probably somebody like Abigail. We don't know if she had children with Nabal, doesn't say. But a woman might have grown up in an abusive kind of family, marries the wrong guy. She thinks he's the right guy, Mr. Right, but he's not. Treats her badly, kicks her out the house shortly after they've had their first child. And here she is, a mom, a mother, now divorced, kicked out. Sometimes the moms had left their job to look after the kids. She got nothing. And she's been kicked out, and all the pain and all the heartache. And she picks herself up, often driven by that child, looking after that child. She'll go and find work. She'll do whatever work to find that work to pay the bills. She'll pick herself up. She will dust herself off. She will pick herself up every day, over and over and over and over, for the sake of that child, to get her life back on track. That's courage. That's courage against all the odds. That's courage that we should celebrate and honor. And with God, what God is able to do to take women broken, hurt, bust up, and discarded, what God is able to do, our church is full of. You're looking at them all around. Women who gave it all over to the Lord, hard as it was, to allow God to heal and restore. All ladies have a story. All ladies have a story. And within that story is often heartache and pain. But today, we honor you. You know, it's the year of the story? Abigail. In 1 Samuel chapter 5, Abigail's the hero. Not Nabal, he was the wealthiest guy in the story. Not David, he was the most powerful guy in the story. The person that saves the day is Abigail. Just a lowly housewife, tent wife, actually. Looking after the tents in a loveless marriage. Because she understood who she was in the purposes of God. As a woman, she was able to step into that place and rescue the whole situation. And in God's purposes, out of that loveless marriage, being betrothed to King David. Isn't that incredible? And so just wanted to encourage you, ladies, today. We love you. We honor you in this church. We are so grateful. Thank you for those who have shared your stories and have been brave in sharing your stories. They inspire us. And they inspire your men to love you more. And when we understand the value of women, gentlemen, then we really are able to honor them and love them even more as God intended it to be. Amen.